Hi there, and welcome to this lecture. In this video, we will explore how we can write and read files in Perl using out-of-the-box tools. And we'll also look into using Perl module called PathTiny, which gives a nice and easy-to-use interface to work with files. However, let's start with looking into how we can write and read files using solutions given by Perl. Now, to write a file, you can use this open function, and this open function takes three things. It's going to take a variable, which is going to be a file handle, and the next is going to be a symbol that indicates if you want to read a file, append a file, or overwrite existing file content. Now here what we can do, we can try to write something to a file to our current location from where we're running the script, and I'm going to call it test.txt. Let's end this line with semicolon. Now the first thing you usually want to do, you also want to call the close statement on the file handle, but you don't want to end up having multiple open file handles, which can lead to memory leaks. So it's a good practice to always open and close your file handles, even if you want to move them to different lines later on. It's just good to have it there for visibility and a reminder. Now let's end this line, and now to actually write something to the file, we can use print. And instead of just printing something like hello world, to the standard output, we can actually provide a file handle. And what's going to happen, instead of printing to the standard output, we're going to print to this file handle, which is going to write something to our file. If we save this and run our script, nothing happens, but that is good because we're also not seeing any warnings. However, what we're going to see that there's a new file next to our script. And this file is called test.txt. Quite conveniently, the file also was created at the time of being written to, so we didn't have to take care of that. If we open this file, we're going to see hello world. Now let's say we want to write multiple lines. What I'm going to do, I'm going to copy these print statements a couple of times, save the file, run it again, and if I go back to test.txt file, I'm going to see multiple lines printed to the file. Now what if we actually had something in the file already? Let's say I already exist and save it in our text file, go back to our script and run it again. And let's go back to the file, to the test.txt. What we're going to see is that what we had originally in our file was actually overwritten. And this is because when we're using this greater than symbol, what's going to happen is that content of that file is going to be overwritten. We did see many hello world lines, but this is also because we are working with a single file handle. So everything is written to that one file handle, which is then saved to this file. Now, that also means that alternatively, we would need to read the file contents in, reprint them to the file, and then append the other lines we want to write to it. But there's an alternative. What you can do, you can use these two greater than symbols. Now if we save this, and I'm going to add new line character at the end of our hello world lines, and if we go back to the test file, and let's reintroduce something like I already exist. If we save that, go back to our script, rerun it, and if we see our test.txt file, now what happened, we actually preserved the original content. So that's the difference between one greater than and two greater than symbols. So if you're using one greater than symbol, it's going to override the contents of the file. However, if you're using two greater than symbols, it's going to append to the file. And that's exactly what happened here. So we already had a content and we just appended our new hello world lines. Now, the question is how we can actually read the content of a file. It's quite similar to writing to a file, but we use less than symbol. And how we can store the content of the file, we can declare a new variable, for example, my content equals, and we haven't seen it before, but we can also use this do block. And what the do block allows you to do, it allows you to define the logic you want to execute, very similar to function, but the difference is that do block is actually going to turn a value at the end. So here we want to return all the content that we read in our file. So how we can do that is by saying local $/ end this line, and then we provide, similar to taking an input what we saw with the diamond operator, instead we can define that we want to take the input from this file handle, which we opened before on this line. Now, if we print out the content through say content, save the file, run the code again, we're going to see all the content printed to our console. Now let's quickly explore what is going exactly here. We have this local $/ and file handle. To put it simply, we are just setting this Perl special variable to undefined, and we're setting it undefined locally in this do block scope. If we wouldn't do that, for example, if I remove local $/ and rerun the code, we're just going to see the first line that we have in our file, which says I already exist and hello world, that we can see here. Now, the reason why we want to localize this variable and set it to undefined is because otherwise Perl is just going to read the input up to the first break line and it's going to stop reading the file. If we set this special variable that indicates the end of the line to undefined, it's going to read all file. You might be wondering, well, why can't we just set this variable to undefined in general? For example, before the code, such as this variable equals undefined. And if you rerun this, it does work. But the problem is that we are affecting the scope of this variable. If we wanted to read different lines of code, or if we wanted to take input from the terminal, this means we have modified this special end of the line indicator because we're setting the scope globally. All we want to do by setting this special variable to local in this do block scope to be able to read contents only of this file specifically without modifying the special variable end of the line indicator globally. And this is how all of this comes together. Here in this do block, we define logic that we want to execute in isolated scope. In this scope, we localize the end of the line variable to be undefined, meaning we want to read the full file content which is currently held by this file handle. And we can do this by telling Perl that the end of the line separator should be undefined, meaning read in all the file. And also, as I mentioned, the difference between if conditionals and the do block is that the do block returns a value at the end of the execution. The meaning is going to return all the contents that was read in from this input. To put it simply, we're just doing this to be able to read in the whole file. Through this file handle we opened up on this line just above the do block. Now there is one pitfall. Reading in contents of a small file is perfectly fine through this approach. However, if you have files that go into hundreds of megabytes or even gigabytes, do note what we're actually doing. We're reading the file in the memory. So this might not be the best approach you want to take. If you are dealing with huge files, what you probably want to do, you actually want to read the file contents line by line. And in order to achieve that, you can use the while loop. So let's replace this do block with while. And what we're going to add in this while loop expression is going to be defined keyword. And here what we're going to do, we're going to say my line equals current line from the input of the file handle. Now what we could do then, we could define a new content variable with an empty string. And here in the while block, we could say that we want to append to the content with dot equals the current line. And then we want to print out the content. If we save this, rerun our code, we're going to see that the content holds all the lines we read in and appended to this content variable. Alternatively, we could instead print line and the current line we're iterating over. If we save this and remove the content variable and rerun the script, we're going to see that we read in each line and we printed it out, followed by two new lines, because the lines we have in the file ends with new line, and then we're saying something which also adds a new line. And this is an excellent approach in case you want to parse the large files line by line. And honestly, that's probably the approach you want to take most of the time instead of reading the whole file in one go. Right, so this is it for this video. We looked at how we can read and write files in Perl using out-of-the-box solution. We know how to write to the files, append to the files, and read the files. However, in the next lecture, we're going to explore alternative, and that alternative is using a module called PathTiny, which gives you a very nice interface to interact with all of these actions where you want to write, read, append to files, and you don't need to think about these internals of localizing things and keeping of state and so on, because that's all managed by the module. I hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you at the next one.